What Eustace thought best what Eustace thought had best been told in his own words, for when they all got their clothes back, dried, next morning, he at once got out a little black notebook and pencil and started to keep a diary. He always had this notebook with him, and kept a record of his marks in it, for though he didn't care much about any subject for its own sake, he cared a great deal about marks, and would even go to people and say, "I got so much. What did you get?" But he didn't seem likely to get many marks on the Dwn Trdr. He now started a, but but as it didn't seem likely to get many marks on the Dwn Trdr, he now started a diary. This was the first entry. August 7th. Have now been 24 hours on this ghastly boat, if it isn't a dream. All the time a frightful storm has been raging. It's a good thing I'm not seasick. Huge waves have been coming in over the front, and I have seen the boat nearly go under any number of times. All the others pretend to take no notice of this, either from swank or because Harold says one of the most cowardly things ordinary people do is to shut their eyes to facts. It's madness to come out into the sea in a rotten little thing like this, not much bigger than a lifeboat, and of course absolutely primitive indoors. No proper saloon, no radio, no bathrooms, no deck chairs. I was dragged all over it yesterday evening, and it would make anyone sick to hear Caspian show off his funny little toy boat as if it were the Queen Mary. I tried to tell him what real ships are like, but he's too dense. E and L, of course, didn't back me up. I suppose a kid like L doesn't realize the danger, and E is buttering up C as everyone does here. They call him a king. I said I was a Republican, but he had to ask me what that meant. He doesn't seem to know anything at all. Needless to say, I've been put in the worst cabin in the boat, a perfect dungeon, and Lucy has been given a whole room on deck to herself, almost a nice room compared with the rest of this place. C says that's because she's a girl. I tried to make him see what Alberta says, that all that sort of thing is really lowering girls, but he is too dense. Still, he might see that I shall be ill if I am kept in that hole any longer. E says we mustn't grumble because C is sharing it with us himself to make room for L. But if that didn't make it more crowded and far more worse. Nearly forgot to say that there is also a kind of mouse thing that gives everyone the most frightful cheek. The others can put up with it if they like, but I shall twist his tail pretty soon if he tries it on me. The food is frightful too. The trouble between Eustace and Reepicheep arrived even sooner than might have been expected. Before dinner the next day, when the others were sitting round the table waiting, being at sea gives one a magnificent appetite, Eustace came rushing in, wringing his hands and shouting out, "That little brute has half killed me. I insist on it being kept under control. I could bring an action against you, Caspian. I could order you to have it destroyed." At the same moment Reepicheep appeared. His sword was drawn, and his whiskers looked very fierce, but he was polite as ever. "I ask your pardon all," he said, "and especially Her Majesty. If I had known he would take refuge here, I would have awaited a more reasonable time for his correction." "What on earth is up?" asked Edmund. What really happened was this. Reepicheep, who never felt that the ship was getting on fast enough, loved to sit on the bulwarks far forward just beside the Dragon's Head, gazing out at the eastern horizon, and singing softly in his little chirruping voice the song that the Dryad had made for him. He never held on to anything, however the ship pitched, and kept his balance with perfect ease. Perhaps his long tail hanging down to the deck inside the bulwarks made this easier. Everyone on board was familiar with this habit, and the sailors liked it because when one was on lookout duty it gave one someone to talk to. Why exactly Eustace had slipped and reeled and stumbled all the way forward to the forecastle (he had not yet got his sea legs) I never heard. Perhaps he hoped he would see land, or perhaps he wanted to hang about the galley and scrounge something. Anyway, as soon as he saw that the long tail hanging down, and perhaps it was rather tempting, he thought it would be delightful to catch hold of it, swing Reepicheep round by it once or twice upside down, then run away and laugh. At first the plan seemed to work beautifully. The mouse was not much heavier than a very large cat. Eustace had him off the rail in a trice, and very silly he looked, thought Eustace, with his little limbs all splayed out and his mouth open. But unfortunately, Reepicheep, who had fought for his life many a time, never lost his head even for a moment, nor his skill. It was not very easy to draw one's sword when one is swinging round in the air by one's tail, but he did, and the next thing Eustace knew was two agonizing jabs in his hand, which made him let go of the tail, and the next thing after that was that the mouse had picked itself up again, as if it were a ball bouncing off the deck, and there it was facing him, a horrid, long, bright, sharp thing like a skewer was waving to and fro within an inch of his stomach. This doesn't count as below the belt for mice in Narnia, because they can hardly be expected to reach higher. "Stop it!" spluttered Eustace. "Go away! Put that thing away! It's not safe! Stop it, I say! I'll tell the captain! I'll have you muzzled and tied up!" "Why do you not draw your own sword, poltroon?" cheeped the mouse. "Draw and fight, and I'll beat you black and blue with a flat." "I haven't got one," "Yes," said Eustace. "I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in fighting." "I do understand," said Reepicheep, withdrawing his sword for a moment and speaking very sternly, "that you do not intend to give me satisfaction." "I don't know what you mean," said Eustace, nursing his hand. "If you don't know how to take a joke, I shan't bother my head about you." "Then take that," said Reepicheep, "and that, to teach you manners, and the respect due to a knight, and a mouse's tail." And at each word he gave Eustace a blow with the side of his rapier, which was a thin, fine, dwarf-tempered steel, and as supple and as effective as birch rod. Eustace, of course, was at a school where they didn't have corporal punishment, so the sensation was quite new to him. That was why, in spite of having no sea legs, it took him less than a minute to get off that forecastle and cover the whole length of the deck and burst in at the cabin door, still hotly pursued by Reepicheep. Indeed, it seemed to Eustace that the rapier might as well as the pursuit was hot. It might have been red hot by the feel. There was not much difficulty in settling the matter once Eustace realized that everyone took the idea of a duel quite seriously, and heard Caspian offering to lend him a sword, and Drinny and Edmund discussing whether he ought to be handicapped in some way to make up for his being so much bigger than Reepicheep. He apologized sulkily and went off with Lucy to have his hand bathed and bandaged, and then went to his bunk. He was careful to lie on his side.